Welcome, everybody, to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. And Phil, brilliant to have you here. To kick off, please introduce yourself and tell everybody about the great work that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, no, first of all, thank you very much, Alan, for inviting me here today. Really looking forward to this. Yeah, so my name's Phil Anderson. I'm a CEO of the Forum, who are helping raising standards in customer operations. We are an independent industry body who promote best practice across all parts of customer operations, so call and contact center, but also field operations, anything where there's a customer involved and there's people involved. We want to help professionalize that. So just like we have high regard for finance, HR, marketing, we want that similar recognition for areas like resource planning, data analytics and insight, knowledge management, continuous improvement. And so what we do is create a community of best practice, which is all around creating a safe environment really for people to come along, whether it's just to listen, whether it is to moan, whether it is to share ideas, whether it is to sort of just get that profile, but to be in a comfortable environment whereby we can actually get some new ideas. And one of the big things we do is we make people learn, and most importantly, we really help people do something differently. So all inclusive, anyone can be a part of us. There's plenty of free stuff, but we do encourage people to sort of enter into that sort of commitment of a membership. And again, our membership is part of a best practice program. It's not just a pay your money and sit back and wait. It's get involved in the program, come along to virtual conferences, networking groups on real niche topics, like speech analytics, like knowledge management, a topic on branch planning or scheduling, amongst other things. And then we've got our conferences, we've got an awards program, and we help people with learning, which is really our sort of background as a learning organization, on-demand modules, in-person modules, supported pathways, all of these things which lead towards becoming accredited, which we believe is a true mark of being of recognizing you're a professional, you're taking your job seriously, and most importantly, you're taking your life seriously. You recognize the difference you can make, not just as a professional, but as a person, which in turn, I think if you can do your job with a smile on your face, you're gonna get through life much better. So I suppose that's what we do in a nutshell. The forum.social is our website. I'm on LinkedIn. So yeah, always love to be connected with people because again, being a learning organization and being at the front of that, I love learning. I think you just learn from every interaction, every conversation we have. So yeah, please feel free to reach out to me.
And Phil, from what you described and from what I know of my engagement with your
Hmm.
organization, what strikes me is how you're very kind of practical and action oriented. So it's not like this might sound critical of some other organization is not supposed to be, but they're kind of a bit showy and a bit fronty. And then behind it, it's like, well, what actually is this about?
It's nice that you can see that. We're a team of practitioners. So I spent 11 years in call centers before I joined the forum. My colleagues have spent some of them much longer than I have in various roles at various contact centers. And I think one of the things we carry with us is that, in some respects, frustration of probably what we had when we were in the world of contact centers. We want to make it easier for others. We want to challenge finance, marketing, those other areas who just think the magic happens when you do something in a spreadsheet, because we can build those spreadsheets and we can build better spreadsheets. So we want to sort of help others really learn from that. And I think that's where that practical element comes from. At the same time, we are really keen to understand the strategy around that. So not just the here and now sorting problems out, but actually how we can create or make better decisions at the right time horizon. And in turn, what is going to be the value of that, which in turn improves just everyone else's decision making. So yeah, I think it's nice to hear that we are very much more practical. I think it can be, we sometimes say, don't want to be critical of others, but it can be very easy to set out a vision, but actually it's all down to what you do, what you deliver, what people are seeing and what people feel. And if we can create that safe environment where people feel part of it, people feel like they're listened to, people feel like actually I'm learning here and getting better, that's ultimately going to help us all raise standards.
Yeah, and I can relate to what you're talking about here with this focus on business as usual or the day-to-day nitty-gritty because my background was commercial hospitality management originally. And I used to have a frustration when I was running a business like a hotel or a conference center that you would get these kind of functional initiatives launched by head office. And they don't really have an appreciation of what has to happen day in, day out for your customers to be happy and for your employees to feel looked after and all of that sort of stuff. And I've always been a real advocate of business as usual as being far more important than perhaps many organizations and leaders give it credit for, because it's maybe seen as not as sexy or not as highbrow as kind of some of the other areas of business.
I think we do get that challenge sometimes. Some senior people may come and say, I want to hear about what's going to happen in 3 or 5 years' time.
Yeah.
And it is difficult because you've got to balance these things because, I'd say if you look back 3 or 5 years ago, we were probably still talking about things that haven't happened. And it's the omni-channel dream sort of thing was one thing. Move to cloud. People are still doing that. Now AI is this big word. And we forget we're already using AI. And a
Yeah.
lot of us are actually using machine learning. So that's the nuanced difference there. And actually, if AI was as easy as we thought, why aren't our knowledge management tools and FAQ questions up to scratch? It's just there's so much work that needs to be done. Let's get the foundations in there, and then we can build upon them. Because if not, AI could be quite damaging, really, if it's misused. Whereas if we learn how to use it, bearing in mind we don't know yet what the potential is because we don't know what we don't know about it. So we need to learn about that together, which in turn will make us help really shape what that could mean for us in different industries.
Yeah. And I think what you just described is even more stark in an environment that is faster changing than it was before.
Yes.
So, you say 20 years ago, you could probably have a pretty good stab at being able to guess what's going to happen in 3 years' time. Whereas now that you're probably not going to be very close at all, actually. And
No.
it's like you say, I think there's a lot more that can be created in terms of value by learning as you go and trusting in that learning as you go, rather than painting this fictitious picture and then trying to get to it, and it doesn't actually materialize in that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's been a challenge for the traditional change or transformation team. Because
Yeah,
whereas once upon a time they could have had 5 years or 3 years to have done a program of activity, you've got 3 months now.
yeah,
And you've got 27 ongoing projects at the
yeah,
same time. And actually, the only way of really implementing successfully all those things is by recognizing you've made a few mistakes along the way and you've gone,
yeah,
that one didn't work. Not everyone trying to get to claim the same benefit, which
yeah,
means, well, what did work? I think having that open, trusted environment is still tough. To create that culture is very, very hard, especially when, as you say, there's these things that happen. There's a volatility and uncertainty that's out there now, which means, in any quarter, any sort of 3 month period, something can happen, which too often means organizations look back at the bottom line, not maybe at a longer term outcome, which then drives a decision, a behavior, and in turn goes back to an old way of culture, looking at outdated KPIs, which aren't even KPIs, which drives your behavior. Very hard to unpick. And, I think it keeps us all in jobs, doesn't it? But it's at the same time, it's not the right level of progress really for us. I think we'd like a bit more of that openness around things.
Mm. And actually, this is it maybe feels a bit of a forced segue into Values Jam, but I'm thinking there is a bit of a parallel here actually, because what we're not doing, like I didn't call you and say, right, Phil, let's agree a value that we're going to talk about, and then when you come online, could you show some slides that you've pre-prepared and
Yeah.
just take us through the deck? What we're going to do now is we're just going to choose a card from here at random,
Okay.
and then we're going to deal with it and see where we go. And that feels much more like the environment that we're operating in now, rather than that other description. So here are the cards. How
Okay.
would you like me to put in front of me?
Two.
Just two. Okay, I'll make them different sizes.
Okay.
No pressure, but choose the shortest one. So would you like the left or the right hand?
Let's go right.
Oh, well done. That is the style. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19 cards in this deck. So number
Okay.
between 1 and 19.
Let's go for number 12.
12. I don't believe this. The ValuesJam has a way of turning up appropriate cards. See how appropriate you think this is.
Oh, well, fantastic efficiency. Yes.
So
Amazing.
the
Designed,
first question,
pre-planned.
what?
Pre-planned.
I don't know. It is a bit spooky, but there you go. We just have to live with the fact that we might not be able to understand why that card's come out, but rejoice that it is an appropriate card. So, to kick off, then, Phil, what does efficiency mean, and what does it look, feel, and sound like?
Wow. So yeah, I think it's a very appropriate one to use for myself to talk about as well, because it's a topic that crops up all the time. First and foremost, I think it's good to start with the meaning of efficiency, because again, I think lots of people will have a different interpretation of it, whether it be productivity, utilization, effectiveness. I think efficiency should be I suppose, the most economical way of operating a system. And I'll think first of all, actually, another example of running efficiency. So I enjoy a bit of running, do trail running, runs up to sort of half marathons. And actually, what you find is you can't set off at full pace. You can't set off too slow. You've got to find a rhythm. You've got to find this sort of running efficiency, this effective pace that you can operate at for the distance of which you are traveling. So I think that's probably a good example of how then you apply that to work, because any role, any job, you need to do it in an efficient way, so that you can keep doing it whilst for the period of time you need to do it. And that's important to note, again, when we sometimes look at our data around efficiency, because there can be lots of people who are very good in short spurts or over longer durations, which might not meet the needs for what you're executing, that particular task, process, or outcome that you're looking for. So therefore, I think it's probably wise in the first instance around efficiency to define it for your business, because it will have a slightly nuanced difference in there around that, say, start, end, and its effectiveness.
Okay, and the things that come to my mind when you were talking about efficiency was the phrase return on effort comes to me. It's like, so how can you make it so that you can either put less effort in and get the same amount out, or put the same amount of effort in and get more out? That strikes me as being a kind of way of looking at efficiency. And you also mentioned the word effectiveness, and I'm curious for you to explain the difference between the two, because I don't think they're exactly the same, are they?
No, they're not. So yeah, you're right. It's different. So I think in the first thing you mentioned there, I think it's the classic statement, isn't it? We want to get more from less people, etc. Can we be more efficient? And that's possible sometimes. As we know, work can sometimes fill the time that's available. Going back to what I just said previously, in a short period of time, you could see that, because short-term effectiveness, people have got the effort maybe to be able to operate at a higher level for a short period of time. Again, like with running though, you'll find your 5K time is typically going to be faster than your 10K time, your half marathon time, because you can operate faster for the 5K, the 3 miles versus that of the 6. I think we need to be very mindful of those longer term impacts, which we're sometimes not aware of. Should we be able to operate with less effort? Again, that's an interesting one, because sometimes less effort can almost mean complacency or a state of being idle. Where actually, as we know, that right amount of challenge, friction, sort of it actually helps to bring the best out in us. And I think that's important to remember. What I was going to say on the second bit, I think this is the danger which organizations fall into of working towards average. I know I've already mentioned KPI already, so key performance indicator. I think too often organizations will set a standard time to complete, right, average handle time, which can be based very much on this sort of almost this normal distribution of what will happen. And therefore, what we're actually driving is average behavior, average performance, which in turn means our perceived efficiency is very average.
Yeah.
Whereas if we use the standard task times, standard process times as more of a diagnostic measure to understand the performance level of each individual, we can then understand what is possible based on who we've got, and almost categorize it in terms of what's acceptable versus what's not. because again, people who operate fast that might not be operating with great quality. Those people operating slow could have great quality, but are just taking too long. And those sometimes in the middle often know all the tricks to do to finish exactly around the middle, so no one needs to manage them. So therefore, without realizing, we can be driving the wrong sorts of behavior, which I think then fits to effectiveness. And this is that, again, understanding of what are we trying to achieve here. So again, in that time frame that we've got, what are the key outcomes that we've got? And there's typically like a scorecard of metrics. It's very rarely one metric that says this is the winner. You know, it's not sport, this is business. So you've typically got a customer lens on that. You've typically got a colleague lens, and there's typically a commercial lens. So thinking of 3 C's. So what is it for the business that we want, which is often the cheapest way of getting to that point to make it more profitable? What's in it for the customer, which is typically around quality. So whatever that is based on your industry. And then for the colleague, which comes back to that effort level, is that level of fulfillment. So I know you could argue some people do like an easy job all day long, but most people want a little bit of something that means they've got connected to a customer to go, I've helped you with your inquiry. It's going to be better for you now. And I've also helped my business, because if I've done those two things, in turn, I'm going to get rewarded, whether it's to keep my job, to get promoted, more money, whatever's in it for them. And I think that's the lens around effectiveness. So efficiency possibly needs to have that sort of at least 3 C's of effectiveness around that.
Mm. And you know that when I was talking about effort, it wasn't so much kind of the level of commitment. It was more about the amount of work necessary. So I've got an example. When I worked in facilities management, there was an archiving system, and the admin people had to order a box folder from one department, and then they had to order a label from another department. And so we said, hold on a minute, this doesn't seem efficient. So what we set up was that when an order was placed for the box folder, it went to the labeling department and then was delivered with its label on to the admin people. So that was what I was meaning about the amount of effort. So we reduced the amount of effort by making that change. And then when you were talking about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, the whole arena of emotion came into my mind, because I thought of my hotel days, and I just thought of a hypothetical situation where you check into a hotel and the check-in is really, really efficient. And you're left feeling completely cold. So,
Yeah.
because there's no warmth of greeting, no smile,
Yes.
nothing at all. But if somebody was to say to you, could you technically assess how this was delivered, you would be kind of, well, it was really fast. I got the right key and all of the information that I needed. So it couldn't be faulted in terms of efficiency, and yet it was so short in terms of the overall experience.
Yeah. And I think that is a very important point, especially in the world now where a lot of self-serve or automation is the preferred way, because I think, to your point, a lot of businesses see that as efficient way of doing things, and it's cheaper because it's not
Yeah.
in having manpower. And you're right, it makes things very transactional, which I think for a number of things probably works quite well. If you've got a quick problem, go online, go on your app. That's the issue, right? I know the answer, it's sorted. I'm not going to go on holiday with you, so that's a good idea. And that's all I need. But there are times in that moment of need, it's always those moments of truth, isn't it? Sort of thing. I think a holiday in particular, because it's very intangible anyway, isn't it? Because it's all about feeling. So therefore, in that example, you want great service. I think very friendly and warm. They're the sort of things you want, aren't they? So I remember I worked in travel before in the world of contact centers. I was very lucky to get a few trips, very cheap trips, very efficient trips, shall we say, to some very nice hotels in the world. And there's one in particular in Dubai that we went to. We actually went there 3 times, but the second time we went, The person that checked us in on his day off came in to say, I'm really sorry I'm not in today, but I
Oh,
wanted to come in and say hello. Lovely guy called Solomon. And he just made sure our whole holiday was great. And those little things you say, oh, you remember, this is sort of 13 years ago now, really remember that. But yeah, I think another industry which is really tough would be healthcare, in particular NHS, National Health Service, whereby again in that moment of need for people, you're wanting that similar level of warmth and understanding, empathy from the people who are going to be looking after you. Yet if a mixture of things, if the funding's not there, the resource levels aren't there, and all the wrong metrics are in place which are driving a certain behavior, you can be left feeling very cold. So yeah, you could come out of the after your care going, yeah, I'm okay now, but go, actually, yeah, it wasn't as good a service as I thought, which I think is a big challenge in that. So yeah, I think it's a really good point, Alan, on that around emotion.
mm. And I liked what you were talking about when you were talking about how you kind of reduce down to average if you're not careful, because you kind of use all these benchmarks and stuff. And I've got a help desk story actually that I think you'll enjoy, because we were opening a new help desk on this portfolio of properties, and I was a service partner. And so I said to my client, what is the measure that you'd like us to be aiming for this new help desk? And he said, well, it has to be a bit more than the existing operations. So I was okay, and I was quite new in the job. So I said, well, let me go and talk to my team about it. And so let's just say that 70% was the overall number
Yeah,
for the existing operations. So I went to my team and I said, look, spoken to the client saying new operation, so it's reasonable to expect higher performance. Um, and they said, oh no, not really, because we get bonused on our target. So can you try and get him to agree that it will be 70%, the same as the others? So I'm from a five-star hotel background, new in this job, thinking this is doing my head in, because my mindset is like, what's the very best we can do?
yeah.
Not going to dumb it. So I went back to him and said, the guys are a bit nervous about it, and I've got a suggestion for you. How would you feel about guaranteeing the bonus payment this year and not having a target, and just saying to the guys, let's see what we can actually deliver? And we exceeded 90% with that new help desk. And that I still, the hairs on my neck stand up when I tell that story, because it's like just how much you're leaving on the table when you go down this other route.
I think it's a really good example. There's still unfortunately a bit of a fixation on some of these targets. And again, because data is so available now, the danger is we look at data to go, well, that's going to tell us everything, but actually it often doesn't. It's what it's not telling you is actually what's most important. And I think in the example of targets drive behaviors, as the classic sort of comment says, it can breed fear, can't it? So in
Yeah.
that example, the fear was not driving the right behaviors, because it wouldn't have been that we need to do just enough, but the fear of missing was so big it made people not go any further than that. Whereas actually, yeah, to remove that, but actually hospitality in most cases, and in a lot of businesses, people do want to do a really good job. So
Yeah.
then given the opportunity to go better than 70%, I think it can work in some instances. So yes, no surprise. So as I said before, we talk about these metrics like service levels as diagnostic measures, because it's just one indicator, isn't it, of the overall feeling, emotion, service level. So just by recognizing that there will be days that are different. So let's understand why and what could we do about that? Or just recognize, right, it's okay on some days that sometimes the service level is not as high because the cost will just exceed too much. But if most of the time we can over exceed on that because there's no limit, let's see what's possible. And it creates a better conversation, I think, doesn't it? Because again, people want to achieve a target, so they often don't tell you what's gone wrong that day, because Whereas if you create this unlimited feeling, people can say, actually, this didn't go well yesterday. So we would have been hit by our service level. Right, let's have a conversation about it then. So others can learn from that, and then those learn from that as well. And there's very few organizations who are truly like that in terms of being able to bring out the dead, bring out your mistakes in an open environment to be able to have that conversation about it.
Yeah. Have you come across a guy called John Seddon?
John Seddon. I think I recognize the name from a book.
Yeah, so he has written a book. I went on a call of his last week, and the thing that struck me he talked about was failure demand.
Yeah.
Now, I'd never really thought of it before. Have you come across that in call
Yeah,
centers?
it is quite common in a number of our industries, really, in terms of that's what's driving the demand is failures in different processes. Yeah,
Yeah. So, his point was that in many businesses, particularly say call centers, there's this focus on efficiently handling the demand
yes,
instead of realizing and recognizing that the demand shouldn't be there in the first place if you'd done the job right.
yeah,
And it was like a real penny drop moment for me, actually, because it's so easy to just get caught up in oh, we've got 1,000 calls to service, let's do it the best way we can,
yeah.
and actually ignore why they're coming in the first place.
So yeah, example of that actually is when it's an old story of mine, so I'm sure I can share it because the business doesn't really exist anymore. We had a department that used to watch the web analytics of people using the website, and if they dropped out at certain points, because we had the information of the customer, we could call the customer to get the sale. So not surprisingly, this small team of people watching people trying to book a holiday to jump on to buy, they were quids in every month because and then I remember thinking about why aren't we understanding at what point of the journey are they failing? And we can, and then when we did put a process improvement in place, morale went down because they were going, hang on a minute, you're stopping all these people. And it's like, well, yeah, because we're realizing it's this part of the journey that they're ending at. So again, it's an example of whereby without that understanding, so in this instance, data really supported us the team would have carried on looking like they were doing a great job because their
Yeah,
sales are great, they're helping people and coming back to customers, what you're saying before, they were trying to book a holiday online to then for someone to intercept that, to then give them a great service to get the holiday. This customer probably had the best of both worlds. They thought they were being self-served and then they've been handheld through. But actually the aim was to get more customers on there doing these things even more effectively. So got there in the end. But yeah, it's a good example of that, whereas yeah, without that understanding, we could have carried on for quite some time doing that.
yeah. And you reminded me of two stories. One is again, it's a call center, and so the organization put in place bonus payments for answering within a certain number of rings. And then they got completely confused because they were paying out the bonuses, but getting lots of complaints.
Yeah.
And when they investigated, they discovered that the call handlers were cutting people off mid-call in order to answer the incoming call
Next one.
in
Yeah.
time and meet their target. It's like,
No. Yeah, we've seen other examples like that where people bring in like a small concierge service. So therefore your initial service level is good, but then they transfer it out. So the call is now in another queue somewhere else. And it's just that's not what you're trying to achieve here. It's if yeah, it's fascinating. Some of the things people do are never cease to amaze, shall we say, when targets are in place, when targets are misunderstood. And again, it usually describes what the culture of the business is like, because it's typically saying not only is the target misunderstood, but no one's willing to challenge it if you do
yeah,
understand it. Because
yeah.
actually, most senior people, if you do initially push back, they won't like it, but eventually will go, actually, there's some sense in that because I can see that it's driving the wrong behavior. So as long as you've got the solution of here's an alternative, here's what else has worked, it can usually make a very compelling discussion or argument to be able to say, yeah, let's stop doing some of these bad things.
So what we've done so far, I think, is we've had a really good dive into the kind of rational view of what efficiency is. So
Yeah.
let's tap into that more creative side and deal with the metaphor element of this question then. So when you think of the word efficiency, what images come to mind? What sounds come to mind? And what feelings come to mind?
Yeah, so efficient clockwork, a Swiss watch would definitely be one of the first things that I'd think about.
Okay.
Uh, I think it's just in terms of its aim, isn't it? I mean, it's got to keep time. Every second counts. It can't be behind on any of those seconds. And so yeah, to think of some of those early designs where they just work and just keep time going to help everyone keep in order and ultimately to help track efficiency. That's the ultimate efficient um, sort of piece of machinery. I think the other thing is on running is Elliot Kipchoge's sub 2 hour marathon, which I know is not a world record because of various things, but the level of detail to go into that particular journey down to what he was wearing. Obviously, the famous trainer, the band trainer, which is now any race you go on, about one in or about two in five people are wearing the same ones, the Vaporflies. But then the way in which the sort of they protected him from aerodynamics with the reverse sort of way everyone ran. They even raised the road going round the roundabout so that it was at the exact sort of I suppose lift on the ground to be able to go around without losing any momentum, to have water brought to him, but then ultimately to run that many kilometers, so 26 miles, obviously, but to run it so efficiently, the splits are just unbelievable, unbelievable. So if I look at my splits, they're all over the place. Not surprising, I'm not Elliot Kipchoge, but the hits were within seconds. It's just like that is unbelievable. So I think the thought and the work to be able to create that is a great story around what is possible. And again, not just one person, but actually there's a team of people to help and be a part of something.
Okay. And then what about feelings, Phil?
Yeah, I'd probably use the word flow. Again, if I think of both, if you think of the clock, especially some of the really nice Swiss watches, definitely I've not got one of these, but the second hand just sweeps round, doesn't it? Whereas the classic clock in the kitchen, you can hear every second, can't you? That goes round, but it's working efficiently. Whereas the Swiss watch is going around sort of smoothly, just always keeping time. And then back with the running, as I've just said there, it's that sort of it's that state of flow. Again, I'm probably sure we've all felt it at some point in time when you're doing something that you can do, and you're really enjoying doing it, but you're doing it really well. Next thing, you're not even thinking you're doing this. You're in this state of flow. Whether it's the tennis players sometimes see just doesn't miss a shot because every single shot they can just see the ball, even though it's going however fast these balls go nowadays, or even the footballer, you sometimes see it how they're passing and moving. It's just in a state of going, the other team can't get close to these, and it's just yeah, I think it's that sort of feeling of West, which is yes, that sort of effort. It's almost effortless. As you used one of your words before, it looks effortless. It appears that it's in a almost a magical feeling.
Yeah, I know. So metaphors for me. So the image, I've got two images that come to mind when I think of efficiency. One is a Formula One pit stop. And
Mm,
I am just like, my jaw is down on the floor when this happens in like 4 seconds.
yeah.
And it's like, how does that happen? And actually, I'm going to come back to, the answer to how does that happen in a bit. Um, Another is an operating theatre where you've got a surgeon operating with a team of people, and there is kind of silence and quiet instruction and everybody moving with purpose and doing what they need to do. And again, it doesn't look as though they're trying very hard, and it's extremely efficient. Um, the sound that comes to mind is that of a metronome for me, and I wonder whether that's informed by what you were talking about efficiency can't be just like a flash in the pan. It has to be like ongoing. Um,
Mm,
and then I love what you were talking about with regard to flow. And I think the bit that I'm focused on is everything that made the flow possible, because it doesn't just happen like that. It's like hours and hours and hours of work in order that to all of the detail that you were talking about the running is what you're used to and you can do, and then you don't have to think about it and try, so it all
mm,
comes together. And I not so much now because he doesn't play, but Roger Federer for me was the tennis player that I used to love watching more than anybody else because he had this kind of, you used the word magical, magical blend of power and grace that I
Yeah.
don't, it's just a beautiful combination.
Yeah, I agree. Even what he wore just looked great. And whereas Nadal was a little bit all over the place, could never stop messing, never looked comfortable, did he? Whereas Roger was just immaculate, wasn't he? I think I like that one. Just going on to sound, actually, when you mentioned about the metronome just going backwards and forwards, and again, really big music fan. What I like is when you read some of the stories about, especially bands 70s, 80s, who never used to use those because the rhythm section was so tight. Actually, when you do sometimes listen to a song now, it actually ends a bit quicker than it started. I remember first I read this about Van Halen. So obviously you all know Eddie Van Halen, one of the greatest guitarists of all time. But the rhythm section of his brother Alex on drums and Michael Anthony on bass, often it would start at a certain tempo, but then by the end, because you could almost sense the band knew this is a great song, it just got a little bit quicker. And then I think another example is Chic, as we all heard now Rodgers now, but actually the rhythm section of the late great Tony Thompson on drums and Bernard Edwards on bass, it's fantastic. So even though it wasn't this constant, the rhythm was so tight, it could adapt, it could be at a different tempo, could be at a different pace, all of those things there. That just, yeah, I thought it was again, there was an efficiency, isn't there? Efficiency of those instruments being played. That looks cool as well.
Yeah, for sure. And last year, I was lucky enough to meet a guy called Jeff Mims. So he's a psychologist, but he does research into the area of music. And actually, I did a values jam with Jeff.
Okay.
But his research is into what, and again, I hadn't come across this phrase, but it's musicians being in the pocket. So this is when they're experiencing that moment of inflow, when it's almost otherworldly. You're just out of body almost. And that's fascinating to hear the musicians talking about when that happens, both to them individually and also to the band collectively. And there's something about music, isn't there, that so for instance, Britain's Got Talent or The Voice or something like that. If somebody's got a really great voice, I cry. What's that about? It's not because I'm sad. I'm just like affected by it. And
Yeah,
there's just something truly wonderful about music.
I agree. Yeah, something very powerful. I like that.
So let's deal with another question. Let's get
Okay.
very practical now. So when have you experienced efficiency?
When I've experienced it. I think work wise, where we are now, we have to be very efficient with how we do things because we are essentially juggling a lot of things. This is we often use the expression we're often spinning many plates. I think at the same time, though, what we do is create frameworks to understand what are we doing, and then make sure that there's never any single thing that we do in isolation. Everything we do will have some carryover into something else. So therefore, you're sharing some of that effort. So for example, we write a best practice guide each year, which is often a mixture of the thinking we've just developed over the previous year. So all the discussions we've opened, the key topics that have been mentioned, and then we're starting to think about a bit of a projection of what's going to happen next with these things. So that's a big piece of work, as you know, writing a book, it takes a while. So you're writing, so it's about 120 pages, there's enough in there. But then what we use is that every virtual networking session will relate to a article in there. So again, we're either reopening a discussion to capture examples or to take on the discussion, or to introduce something new that will become an article for next year. Therefore, every conversation we have with our members, which is a key part of what we do, is just general catch-ups and just be used as a sounding board. We're then understanding what their challenges are against these concepts we're viewing throughout the year, our themes, to work out, is there something new? Have we missed something? Or how does that relate to people? And I think that helps us to become more efficient because it means it gives you an ability to do more, but at the same time, it means that you can always element of recycle and you can regrow, you can redefine and move things forward. And that's probably taken us And being honest, that's probably taken us about 3 years to get to this point where as a team, we understand that we're not just a set of dates in the diary. We're not a set of just, we'll do an event and that's it. It's about this is how we move that forward. And here's the new things we're going to do. This is what we'll do next. I think I'd like to say it's probably a good example of where we've been aware of actually, if we just go after things on their own in isolation, we're going to put a lot of effort in and actually, at worst, work against each other, or even worse, work against exactly what we're trying to do, which is our community of best practice, work against them, almost telling them what to do as opposed to being shaped by what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And I think what you're touching on here is how actually efficiency can be hampered by too much focus because you then don't see the connections.
Yeah,
And I really like what you're saying about, it's like keeping your eyes wide open rather than like this.
yeah,
Um, and I notice that from some of the work that I do because, and often it's not planned from the beginning, but it's more about having a constant awareness of reapplicability or repurposing or
yeah,
reshaping, so that you don't have to start from scratch, and you've got this leg up. Um, but like I say, I'm thinking of examples over the past couple of years where I couldn't possibly have predicted the repurposing that would have happened 18 months later.
yeah.
And so is that about efficiency? Which strike efficiency, when people talk about that, it strikes me as being a kind of pre-planned approach. Whereas what we're talking about now is efficiency in terms of opportunity and recognizing it and taking it.
Definitely. I think it's important. Obviously, you need a focus, you need a purpose, but I think it's important that that can adapt and change. I think we all need a plan because the intent to do or not do something is a plan.
Yeah,
But as we all know, with a plan, it's gonna need to change, and that's an important. It's something really crucial to remember that there needs. We use the expression playbooks, so operational playbooks, in that you almost think through, right, what's likely to happen, so the things we know that could happen, and therefore you're already pre-prepared. So in this situation, this is what I will do. So I think that helps because it means you can react appropriately because you're more anticipating this is the direction. I think then by doing that sort of feedback of, okay, what have we just tried to do and how well did we do it? So coming back to what have we learned, what are we going to do differently, means you can make the right amount of iteration or change without redesigning everything before you do the next thing. So
yeah,
hopefully you're creating, whether it's just be continuous improvement or just a natural evolution, but at the same time recognize if something's not right or not working, we can stop it. That's fine. And actually, though it's a brave decision, it's often the right decision. But at the same time, it's realizing what's got us to that point to make the decision, which comes back to the sharing. Don't try and do it on your own, get other people's thoughts in there. I think it also helps us where we're not entirely 100% commercial. We can do some things that are right for the community of best practice. That might not be the right thing. It's not making any money, but it's the right thing to do. So doing things, we'll say local government, for instance, or housing associations, it's great to work with those organisations, but they may not have as many funds as
yeah.
utilities or telecoms. So, but it's the right thing for us to do. And so again, understand that I think is important as well. And this is why, as you say, we describe it as almost like a solar system. We've got these planets that are our products, that are our events that do things around the year. And then the sun is the community of people, and then the stars, you get new stars coming in, and it's working out which ones are just, well, great to watch as it flies by versus actually that one is something that's really interesting, and let's put it into our sort of into our system. So again, systems thinking style, I think is a good way of just thinking how everything should work together. But that doesn't mean things can't stop. It doesn't mean to make changes all the time, but it means you've got a framework to be able to understand what's good, what have we learned, what can we do differently.
I love that picture of the universe because when I think of systems, and I think when a lot of people talk about systems, their perspective is rigidity and
Mm,
this is the way it is. Whereas you describing the universe, I think, is a far more valuable way to look at it because it's more real, where things are changing and you're
Yeah.
having to make judgments and all of that sort of stuff. Really, really like that. And then the other experience of efficiency is a personal one, and this is kind of um, sad person Alan. But for instance, in the kitchen, I like things to be where they should be, so that when you're starting to prepare
Yeah.
something, it doesn't take you longer than it should. You know that that one's there, that's there, that's there. And the other day I was thinking, I wonder if you could actually quantify the amount of time you save by having stuff in order
Yeah.
compared to if you had to look for stuff. And if you added that up over a period of, say, a decade, I wonder what
Right,
the
yeah.
delta would be.
That's quite a funny example. I made Christmas dinner this year. It's as if I'm going to try and dine out on this, literally. But I posted a picture just on our internal sort of WhatsApp because I did generally pre-do everything and then I put color-coded post-its on everything on what time. I'll send you the picture, Alan. And so I posted it on there. And what was lovely though, and again, this sounds really old-fashioned, like I'm doing a mother-in-law joke. I'm not, but my mother-in-law, Sheila, she did say genuinely that was the nicest Christmas dinner she's ever had. And I thought that's tremendous,
Really?
tremendous feedback. But yeah, I absolutely agree. I've always, so I don't watch many of the cookery programs. I've always thought how easy it must be when someone's pre-done everything for you, and all they've got to do is go, "Oh, just pick up this and throw it into the pan." So you think, well, how can I replicate that? So I agree, Alan. The amount of times, yeah, you go and make something and it's not even in the cupboard, let alone someone's put it in the wrong place. The amount of time that's lost, yeah. So I agree. Yeah, I like that one. That relates to that.
And on your offer to send me the picture, I would invite you to do a LinkedIn post instead.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. All right. So I'm conscious of time, and let's draw this values jam to a close now. And the question at the end is always the same. So, Phil, what are you encouraged to do differently about efficiency as a result of our conversation?
Yeah, what am I going to do differently? Um, wow, good question. I've always thought of myself as being quite efficient in how I do things. As I say, describe that sort of solar system view of doing things. I think the first thing I'll do is go back to actually how I answered the first question, and that is develop a better definition for it for the next time I get asked what is efficiency. Because to my point that I made, it's a word we probably all know, but we'll have slightly different meanings for. And I think to be able to define that, not just as in a definition statement, but as a this is what it means for customer operations, I think would be a hugely important to again help people to be able to visualize it, to put that sound to it, to be able to really emotionalize it and be able to do something with it. So I'll definitely take that away. I think the other part of it as well is this cycle of efficiency, and which comes back to the flow, because again, the definition is one thing that tells us and helps us be crystal clear what it means, but actually how then what does that mean every day, every week, every month for the next 12 months, and what would be the known alterations within that. So as and when with business peaks, do we expect efficiency to change as new systems, new processes get rolled out? How do we think efficiency will change? Which feeds into the playbook concept of being aware how it does alter, and therefore what are the causes of those alterations. And I think that in itself would be a good article to write. I think there's probably been elements of it we've done in the past, but
Yeah.
not quite to that sort of overarching efficiency lens. It may have been more shrinkage, productivity, task time. And I
Yeah.
think the bringing it up to a more strategic view of efficiency and understanding, I think would be really useful.
Mm. So here's a suggestion, and I don't expect you to answer right now, but I'm thinking that what you described around that articulation of what is efficiency could form part of one of your events. Imagine a
Yeah.
series of values jams on small groups, people talking about what efficiency means to them, and then bringing all of that together would be pretty interesting exercise. For me, I'm going to use your universe metaphor, and I'm going to apply that to the stuff that I'm involved in. Some of it is kind of commercial work, some of it is pro bono, but there is definitely a kind of interaction between a lot of it.
Hmm.
And so up until now, I think I've just lived with it all there, but I'm gonna use your metaphor of a universe to kind of try and map out that universe that I operate within, which I think will be really helpful for me actually. So thank you for that. So efficiency, it's not necessarily the dry word that some people might think
Not
that
at
it is.
all. Not at all. Again, I've got a graphic I'll share with you on that, Alan, about the solar system. Again, I'm happy to put it onto LinkedIn. It's been used now in some of our other things, which is actually a stock image of PowerPoint, which just looks at how the universe revolves around and the different planets. So that could be really useful to pin some of the things. So yeah, I'll share that. But yeah, no, it's a brilliant word, a brilliant topic. I've really enjoyed that, Alan.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, Phil.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Alan. Yeah, take care.